and welcome. This is National Master Jesse Cohen from the School of Chess with more quick bites for you today. I want to talk about the Scholastic 2021 Colorado Open Championship online for the Scholastic that just took place this last weekend. It was an amazing tournament. We had 128 participants, 120 kids, 8 adults. It was a blast. And there were some amazing games of chess played. And one of the cool things that we did is that we partnered up with chess.com, who offered us 10 memberships to their amazing site to give out as prizes, and 2 of them are going to be given out as Brilliancy prizes. And today, I want to look at 2 of the games that have been nominated for Brilliancy prizes to see if they are worthy. Yeah, let's just jump right in. So in this first game, we've got Ayush Vispute versus Grayson Manuel, 2 really amazing kids. These kiddos have been in chess for years. They're like always at the top of their field in Colorado. I think both of them have been state champions or very close. I'm sure Ayush has. I think Grayson has as well, maybe, or very close. Either way, very good players. Let's jump right in. So e4, e6, French defense, d3. Now, I was talking to Ayush about this because it's kind of a weird way to play against the French, but he says he plays this way against like the French and maybe the Caro-Kann. He kind of plays it more like a King's Indian defense. A King's Indian attack, my bad. And so what happens here is pawn d5 striking the center, knight d2. The reason for knight d2 and not knight c3 here is that maybe black will play d takes e4, and we would prefer to play d takes e4 back, maintaining our pawn center, but that would allow this annoying queen trade where we either unactivate our knight or put the king where it can't castle. So instead, knight d2, just in case black decides to trade. I think Grayson correctly goes for a big center. You know, if your opponent is going to establish a good pawn center, then you probably should. Knight f3, knight c6, g3, g6. Now, this is interesting. I definitely applaud Grayson for this idea. Basically, this is also starting to become what very much resembles a closed Sicilian. And in the closed Sicilian, you almost always fianchetto this bishop, or I venture almost just to say always fianchetto your bishop on this beautiful diagonal, accompanied by pushing these pawns and really trying to break through on the queen side. So I like this idea for black. Bishop g2, bishop g7, castles kingside, knight ge7, making sure to develop and not block in that. And then rook e1. So this move to the untrained eye just looks silly. This, what's the real point of this? Maybe we're going to exchange the pawns, have a half-open file. No, not at all. This is part of a deeper King's Indian attack idea. Check this out. Castles kingside, knight f1. Why on earth would this knight want to go to f1? White has this idea. Black has weak, dark squares all over the place because the pawns are all fixated on light squares. And remember, a weakness is only as weak as it can be punished. So, what White is trying to do is this elaborate idea that, again, it might seem like, how did he come up with this? Again, this is standard for a King's Indian attack player. He wants to play h4, knight f1 to h2, and knight to g4. And if you can just imagine the knight on g4 looking at those weak dark squares in combination with the bishop looking at h6, the pawn on h4 helping out with g5, White is making a plan to dominate these dark squares. Rook b8. I was talking to Grayson as well, and this move does make a lot of sense in many Sicilians to help support the pushing of this pawn. But frankly, black can just play the move pawn b5 right now, and I think this is probably the way to go. Rook to here, e5. Again, this explains again as well what the idea behind rook e1 is. By playing this move, hey, what's up, creepy? So by playing this move here, the idea is to lock these pawns. Why would White want to lock pawns in the middle? The answer is the kingside attack. Remember, when you lock the middle, the wing attacks become that much more powerful. And remember, on the other side, if someone's attacking you on the wing, the best counter is a strike in the middle. b5, a3. A little bit unnecessary, maybe. I don't think we need to help out black open up lines over there. a5, bishop f4, standard. b4, h4, knight f5. Getting those knights into good places. Pawn c3. Now again, like, Hey, what's up, Early Fire? What's up, buddy? In this position, like, I see what white's doing here, kind of challenging black, but honestly, I think that this is a little bit of a mistake, just because, again, as white, I'm thinking a few things. I'm thinking the center's locked, I'm going to go for my kingside attack, and I need to be focused on my ideas. I need to be aware of my opponent's ideas, and as long as black's queenside attack isn't going to, like, race out of control and destroy me, I'm going to stay focused on my ideas. In this position, I don't see any real particular threats from black, and so I would just continue playing normal moves like knight 1 to h2 and stuff like that. I think c3 actually helps black open up more lines on the queen side. But funny enough, I talked to Ayush after the game, and he said that this was part of a plan he had. So, I don't know. So he played pawn c3 instead, playing on the queen side when I think he should be playing on the king side. Bishop d7. Kind of a waste of a move. This bishop is bad, right? It's all locked on these pawns, right? Black needs to find a nice open diagonal for it. Doesn't it already seem like it's right there? Bishop a6. I mean, it's not the happiest place in the whole world because the d-pawn can move, but this just seems like a nice logical diagonal, and because he has my name, oh yeah, it's true. It is true. And so, yeah, I don't know. I probably maybe put the bishop on a6. The bishop on d7 is not, like, terrible, but, I don't know. There might be something else. I mean, it does aim at the queen side, and it could maybe, I don't know, control some of these light squares. Knight h2, we were expecting this. Pawn takes pawn. Yeah, I expected this from black. We got to open up those lines over there. Takes back. Rook b2. Now, I'm surprised, actually, that this is considered kind of an error. Maybe. I don't know, the computer's hesitating about it. Personally, I think that this just makes all the sense in the world. I mean, the only downside of rook b2 at all, I can say, is this. We're not taking in white's ideas into consideration, maybe. Maybe we should give them a little bit more credit. And rook b2, you know, c3 and a3 are natural targets. It seems like we kind of want to get the rook to b3. I don't know if this move works, but part of me was thinking like a4 here. Trying to play rook to b3 and attack those pawns, and if that queen takes there, that there should be some sort of tactic like knight takes e5. And so, I mean, we got to be a little bit careful because of that, but I think this all works out. So I was kind of thinking a4 again and rook b3 and getting that way. Because again, it's not just about penetration, it's about what those targets are as well, right? So queen c1 attacking the rook, queen b6, and now here's where something's going to go crazy. Knight g4. And now, you would be surprised here. Think about this position for a second. What would you play as black? Okay? In the game, I remember suggesting that I would play the move queen to b3, continuing penetration into white's territory, maybe threatening things like rook c2 or queen c2, stuff like this. In the game, however, what was played was knight ce7, which has great intentions. It really does have great intentions. Hold on, is that... Let me make sure that's looking okay. Yeah, it really has great intentions, but the problem, I mean, like, so, okay, what is the idea behind this? The idea is to open up this bishop. Maybe get this bishop to a4, help that rook go to c2, you know, neat ideas like that. And, you know, on the surface, trying to take a piece that's not doing well and put it into a situation that's going to help your team, usually that's a great idea. It just so happens that in this position, for both positional and tactical reasons, we should have given white's ideas a bit more credit. Ayush now strikes here with knight f6 check. Simple check, but the problem here is that black has to give up this bishop on g7. Otherwise, if we move the king to h8, we lose a bishop followed by the exchange. It's going to be pretty painful. And when we give up that bishop, remember what I said earlier, black is riddled with dark square weaknesses because all the pawns are on light squares. And so white is constantly searching, how can I get my pieces on those squares and maybe get something over there? So with black's bishop disappearing from the board, which was really covering those weaknesses well, you know, black is in some serious trouble right now. And on top of it, he's got to move his knight, and there's really nowhere else to go but going back. g4. This move, again, spectacular. Normally, I'm not a big fan of, you know, pushing pawns from my castle king, but as masters in training, we should always be looking for the checks, captures, and threats, constantly searching for that break that's going to win for us. And in this position, you know, that knight is unfortunately just trapped. And so Grayson tries to counterstrike with e5, but after take, and take, even though this knight can find safe haven on d6 guarded by the queen, that knight moving would allow queen to h6 and going into g7. And one of the cool parts about this game was, you know, as we were talking to Ayush about it, he was saying that he was seeing all these ideas like 5 and 6 moves ago. He was really planning this out a bunch. And so basically, after the exchange here, you know, it's really hard to find a good move for black. I mean, the knight is in trouble. We also don't want to get mated. And realistically speaking, there's not much of a way to hang on too much anymore. I mean, you could try a move like queen b3 again so that you could mate pawn takes knight with queen c2. And there's no time for queen h6 because of queen takes f2 check and followed by queen g2 mate. We get the mate first. But, you know, white can just trade off the pieces and, you know, it's just up an entire bishop in this position. And at their level, they're so good that it's almost a certainty to be over. So in the end, Grayson ended up playing knight takes h4, which did allow queen h6 and then did resign. So again, this was a nomination for the Brilliancy Prize, and I've got to say it's a really good contender. You know, one of the things I think that stands out about this game is that it's really hard to see where black messed up. You know, it takes a fine-tooth comb to figure out that knight ce7 really was kind of the breaking point where, you know, we were putting one piece in a bad spot to help another piece, kind of this good and bad thing that probably neutralizes each other, and, you know, we didn't give our opponent enough credit for their ideas. Because otherwise, you know, both players look like they're doing everything right here. It just kind of comes out of the blue. And then again, you know, Ayush's fine tactical calculation, as well as all that foresight about those dark squares, you know, that plan combined with that calculation, followed by the g4 tactic, I definitely think that this is a good contender for a Brilliancy Prize. So well done to Ayush, and, you know, also well done to Grayson. Again, like, put yourself in Grayson's shoes and imagine thinking that, you know, do you think that you would conclude that knight ce7 is just a losing move? You know, it's really tough. Anyways, moving on to our second candidate, I think, today, that I'm going to observe for the Brilliancy Prize, is this game. This game was played by none other than two very well-known Scholastic players in our community, Shivan Saxena and Sami Alitsani. Both of these players have been playing very accurately, very actively since they were like in elementary school, and they just never stopped. And they are very, very strong players. I'm pretty sure that Sami has been state champion before for his age division, or very close. And Shivan is, he either is, you know, same story. So this was the 9th and 12th grade division. In the end, Shivan actually won this division. Let's take a look at this. So Shivan leads off with a English opening, kind of a reverse Sicilian. The idea is to fight from the wing for those light squares in the middle. Knight comes out to its best square, both sides just bringing out those pieces. And then, yeah, g3. Remember, you know, in the Sicilian and in the English, it's just so common to fianchetto that bishop so that the knight and the pawn are all working together towards those light squares for that domination. d5, strike in the middle. Pawn takes, d4, makes sense. If we just develop our bishop right now, we might start getting smacked around by black's superior center. So instead we freeze that, bishop b4, knight f3, castles, here, castles. And both sides are just, you know, doing basic development here. Nothing is too special really going on, in my opinion. Queen e7, saving the bishop, a3, bishop to a5, saving it logically, and rook e1. Now, when I first saw this game, I thought to myself, this seems wrong. What is the idea behind rook e1? The rook can't go anywhere from there. It does line up with the queen, but this pawn is blocked. If you're going to try to play for e4, black has way more control over that square than white does. But no. But white has this kind of long-term idea. Black tries to occupy the center really nicely with knight e4, but just knight d2. And Shivan kind of declares boldly that he has this idea to play f3 and e4, because, I mean, let's face it, white has a center pawn majority, 2-1. And logically in chess, we should use the things that we have that our opponent does not as much as we possibly can. We should make them as good as we can. We should use them as much as we can. So trying to use this pawn majority and safely advance it makes a ton of sense. Oops, whoa. Way too far. Sorry about that. Knight takes d2 trades. Bishop takes back. Bishop back to b6, targeting the d4 pawn. Maybe trying to delay white from doing this because of this lineup and the d pawn. e3, knight d7, rook c1, knight f6, knight a4. Something else I'd like to mention about this position is that a very common pawn structure has arisen, and it's this one. This pawn structure and these open files. This happens all the time, especially in Queen's Gambit exchange variations, where white ends up capturing on c takes d5. These kind of positions happen all the time. And in these kind of situations, white often is looking to put a knight into a really nice stronghold on c5, and black is often looking to put a knight really nicely on e4. On top of this, because of the placement of pieces, white is also really eyeballing the skewer. Queen d8, kind of passive, you know. I think that we could have played maybe a move like rook e8 and, actually, activated a piece. Remember in chess, if you have to defend, you should use Lasker's principal defense. A, don't defend unless you have to. B, if you have to defend, use the least inconvenient move you can think of. Undeveloping my queen is definitely quite inconvenient. Not only does it hurt my queen, but it impacts my rooks and how they can activate. So I feel like moving the rook to a half-open file with the queen is a useful move that avoids this skewer by avoiding the lineup, whereas the other one is just passive. Queen d8, knight takes b6. Also kind of surprised by this move. I kind of liked the knight going into c5 and black making the trade and keeping this kind of open lineup. Trade, 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 f3. It's finally coming. We're going to play e4. Or are we? Black seems to have too much control. Shivan tries, because right now we have to count. If we play e4, remember, if you want to be a solid intermediate player in chess, you have got to be able to quickly count if something is attacked and defended enough. In this position, white has 3 defenders and black has 4 attackers. It's just not going to work out. So he tries to play rook e2 so he can double up, and Sammy says, no, put your rook back. I probably actually would have played some move like b5 and let him do this, and then maybe here, who knows. Same thing. Bishop d3 goes back, g5, g4, kind of interesting, kind of weird. And they start shuffling around for a bit. Now here, in the end, Shivan ends up playing some amazing chess, and he has been playing some good chess. But in this position, if you ask me, Shivan's biggest advantage is the bishop pair and the dark square bishop. Typically, most masters will agree that 2 bishops are better than 2 knights or a knight and a bishop in more circumstances. And in this position, to trade off that bishop, I know that this bishop is annoying, but I just wouldn't trade it off. If I was playing white here, I probably would have some idea of like king f2 followed by h4 and rook h1, because let's face it, in this position my pieces need to get active. I'm trying desperately to find any way to activate any of these pieces. Maybe this bishop can go to b4, d6 and e5, maybe. This bishop, on the other hand, it's not so great. It just wants to support e4. I don't know, this is kind of what I was thinking. Trading off the bishops, not a big fan of it. But we do end up in this position that I think is rather equal. Again, I like the bishop a little bit better in this position because it's more open and there's pawns on both sides of the board. Remember, bishops are better in endgames with pawns on both sides because they can impact both sides at the same time. Rook d1, rook d8, b4. I like this move. White is starting to play very accurately. Notice that white does not have to guard the pawn on e3 because of here. So again, since he doesn't have to defend, he shouldn't. And by playing b4, we're trying to break black's space advantage. And notice that these pawns, if they just keep sitting here, they're blocking our rooks. We need open pathways. Again, when in doubt, make your pieces good. If you're like, do my rooks have open files? Do my bishops have open diagonals? Do my knights have outposts? If you can't answer yes to these questions, you probably should start fixing those things. b4, c4. And now, a tough call by Sammy. By playing c4, he gets a passed pawn, but he also situates both of his pawns on light squares while white is already ready to have a firm dark square blockade. I think I probably would have preferred the move b6 and trying to maintain these pawns as such. c4, king f2, b5, e4. Strong move by white. Again, white has been looking to break black's center for a long time, and since the pawn is pinned due to rook takes rook, it finally works out. Rook a6, rook a1, rook d7. Oh yeah, by the way, This was not a real threat because the rook's guarding the bishop, so we maybe didn't have to guard it, but actually Shivan has another idea behind it. Rook d7, a4. Now, I don't know what I think about this move. It's really on the cusp of being like, is it brilliant? Because we're sacrificing a pawn in the endgame, which makes it even more scary. It's like, you could sacrifice a pawn in the beginning when you have a ton of pieces left, but it's a lot more scary to sacrifice when there's almost nothing left. But what he's trying to do is one of the most important things that we can do in the endgame, which is create pawns that have the most potential to get across and make a queen. Right now, white doesn't have any passed pawns. Playing a4 changes that. Pawn takes pawn. Now this pawn is free. Pawn b5, rook b6, rook takes a6, a4, d takes e4. Now here's about the time that black is about to blunder. And in fact, oh, that was it right there. That was it right there. Yep, I remember this. In this position, black to move, eventually that tension just got to him. He's just like, I just got to get rid of it. But here is where Shivan did come up with something pretty cool, I thought. Rook a8 check. King h7 only move, really. Rook takes rook. Why? To make the knight move, so it can unblock our bishop, so that the bishop can cover h8, so that we can play rook h8 check, king to g6, and rook to g8 check. And I love this, I love this, I love this. It is so smart because in the middle of this pawn hanging and us thinking about recapturing this, instead of just playing robot moves, we're looking for those combos. And now black has to play rook or king h7, allowing rook g7, and now this is game over. This check is the game over. Why? Black now has to walk into one of the most dreaded things that any of us ever has to do in chess, the dreaded windmill. After king h8, which is the only move, white has the freedom to move this rook on. Black has the freedom, or white has the freedom to move this rook anywhere basically with discovery check on this king. Now here Shivan should have gotten a little bit more greedy. He saw that if he played rook takes f7 check, the king would have to get out of check, and then he could pick out this knight for free. I probably would have played rook takes g5 pawn check. Oh, wait a second. That would have been bad. I would have messed up. Darn. He didn't have a full windmill. He could have blocked with f6. That would have ruined everything. I was thinking rook takes g5, king h7, then rook g7 here, and then this discovery and get one more pawn. But that wouldn't have worked. Shivan did correctly. He did correctly. He went right for the knight. Rook takes f7. That's when you just got to keep it simple. And then, boom, there goes the knight. And he keeps his passed pawn, followed by winning these remaining pawn. And then, yeah, that passed pawn starts getting pushed hard, and it's not long before Sammy, unfortunately, has to surrender. It's just too much. So, again, you know, there were definitely some middle game things that I think need to be addressed in this game. However, for the most part, I think that Shivan and Sammy played wonderful chess. They obviously still have plenty of room to improve. However, again, like, the game is pretty solid, and I think my favorite part definitely is that whole combo there at the end. It's really, really clever. I don't know if it's pure brilliancy, but it's definitely a good candidate. So anyway, this is going on longer than I thought it would go, so I'm gonna wrap this up now. But yeah, I just want to thank you for joining me, National Master Jesse Cohen, Summer School of Chess. Please like this, subscribe, follow me, give me, you know, all your time and attention. That's all I want. And I'll see you next time. Bye.